Today I'm going to paint up one of Warhammer Fantasy's largest war machines, the Siege Tower. Welcome back to Anvil of Doom Miniatures. My name is Deets and I hope you've all been well. Now I don't know why, but I really love the weirder and wackier models that GW's produced over the years. And back in the late 80s and 90s, Warhammer Fantasy had some siege elements to the game. And with that came some really fun models like the Battering Ram, the Siege Cauldron, and also the Mighty Fortress. One day I will have you in my arms. Now you might be wondering, how would I get my troops on this Mighty Fortress's walls? Well, with the Siege Tower of course. Now, I recently managed to get my sticky mitts on this plastic behemoth and I could have not painted and built it for you all. This is one of the rare occasions where a Warhammer miniature had movable parts, and on this guy he has a little mechanism that can open and close the door, and I think that's pretty cool. Also, I've decided to give this tower an Avalan theme because it just screams Empire to me. Anyway, let's get straight into it. As you know, there's not much I love more than a Warhammer kit from the 90s, still in its original box, but it's definitely a bonus when it's still wrapped in plastic. Little Deets would be so proud of me right now. Opening this box, I can see there are 4 heavy, large sprues with the bulk of the tower parts. There was some string to operate the doors, and 2 smaller sprues with the wheels. Also, there was a lot of great timber texture with nails and some leather protection for the front of the tower. Now there comes a time when you open up a miniatures box and you're looking at all the parts and you have to decide how you're going to tackle it in terms of painting and building it. With this guy, he's very big, got some large pieces and some hard to get to areas, so I've decided to paint it sub-assembled. When I'm looking at the plastic, I always try and envision how I'm going to paint it, and I imagine if I had it all stuck together and built, how hard it will be. And with this guy, because it's so large, it's actually probably the largest miniature I've ever painted, it would just be an absolute nightmare. Now there is a lot of plastic bits to get prepped before I can even start thinking about painting. So first up, I trim each part of the tower off the sprue, and there's really something about trimming sprues that I find relaxing. I've said it before, but that solid click sound and the piece falling away is pretty therapeutic to me, and I'm lucky there is a lot to get through, so I was in heaven. Now heaven can quickly turn into hell when you realize there are a few mold lines to clean. In this case it wasn't too bad because the timber textures on the panels did hide a lot of them. When I started painting, I really didn't care too much for mold lines. I'd clean them up, but I wouldn't go into too much detail with them and not care if I missed one. But today is a different story. I can't stand them. If I miss one, it's game over for me. I failed, and it's pretty funny how much we change over time. I'm using some blue tack or poster putty to cover the joins that will be glued together later, as I don't want too much paint covering these areas. So looking at the instructions, I could see the top crow's nest part of the tower could be glued together at this point of time because it just slips on top after the rest is built. So I'm going to build it now to make life easier while I'm painting. And I think I'll give the timber paneling on this sucker the Avalan yellow and black treatment. Also, I'm gluing the wheels together as they'll be easy to paint whole. There were around 26 large pieces to this behemoth, and I need to make sure they all got a good prime and are easy to handle while I'm painting, so I'm using some small containers and some cork just as handles. Time for a prime, and I've ran out of Chaos Black unfortunately, so I'm settling for a squirt of Wraithbone all over. After spraying all of that plastic, I'm now out of Wraithbone as well, so it's definitely time for a trip into town for some hobby supplies. With this much texture to the mini, it'd be stupid of me not to dry brush the whole thing because I'll probably be here forever if I didn't. Now, I don't really dry brush my smaller miniatures because I do find it leaves a little bit of a grainy texture to them, and I probably need some more practice at dry brushing, but for larger miniatures like this, I'm not too fast. I'm going to go over every wooden piece with a base coat of Vallejo Beastie Brown, but you could definitely use Mournfang Brown by Citadel as I find they're pretty close. Now you're probably the same as me and you have a bunch of old bottles of paint laying around that never get used, and I need to free up some space, so I'm making a conscious effort to use them up and then hopefully buy some new and improved paints. There are a few different brands I'm thinking about trying out, but if you have a range that you'd like to see me use on the channel, let me know down in the comments below. I'm all ears. I'm going to give the rest of the timber a light wash of Agrax Earthshade to darken up the recesses on the timber, as the Beastie Brown is just a little too light for my liking. I'm watering this down a fair bit as a full-blown Agrax Earthshade can look a bit dirty, and we already went full dirty in the last video painting up that chubby Nurgle boy, so we're having a break this week. Now it's time for the fun part, and let's start dry brushing. As I said before, I'm not really a seasoned veteran at dry brushing. I really only use this technique for certain minis that would take me way too long to paint the old-fashioned way, and I'm simply loading up the brush with some paint and then giving it a gentle wipe off on some paper towel and then brushing it all over, nothing really to it. A bit of advice if you're tackling something this big is to set yourself up like a production line. I have every bit ready to go on my left and then once it's done, I place it on my right hand side. I know it seems obvious, but it might give you a sense of satisfaction as you go, as you can see how much you've done. I've started off with a mix of Beastie Brown and Scrag Brown, and then worked my way down to pure Baylor Brown, making sure I hit all the edges on that last dry brush. Baylor Brown has a yellow tone to it, and it will definitely make the timber pop a little more. The front of this tall go-kart had some leather hides attached, and I don't want them all to be same, so I've gone for 3 earthy colours that won't stand out too much from one another. The last thing I want is for some of the leather hides to stand out against others, as it could be a little bit jarring to the eye. When slapping down these pigments, I'm making sure I paint each colour on every third panel to give it some randomness. The great thing about these colours was that it didn't matter if I was a bit messy here and there, as they blended together pretty well and you couldn't really see any of the mistakes. Once they were all down, it was time for another wash of Agrax Earthshade, making sure it pulled in all the recesses, and that was another pot of paint finished. Now I was going to paint this leather the old fashioned way and do some highlights, but there was too much great texture that I couldn't not do some more dry brushing. I'm going over with some Morghast bone, and then I mix in some bone white and go over again. Last up, I mix in a tiny bit of white to this, and then just focus on hitting the edges. Now all the dry brushing is complete, it's the time that all you Avaland lovers have been waiting for, and it's time to get some yellow and black on this big sucker. But before we do that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. Now in some big news, I've finally caved and decided to start building an army of the Empire. And there's no surprise here, but I've chosen to go with the state of Avaland, so I hope you won't mind seeing a bit more Avaland on the channel in the future. With all the hype of the old world, and after painting those Avaland arches at the start of the year, it has got me pretty hyped to slowly start building this army. Now I'm not going to rush into this project just yet, I'll take my time, but I have acquired a bunch of Empire boys that need a coat of paint, so stay tuned. I'm a massive fan of a vibrant, bright yellow, and I have shown you this recipe in the past, so I'll go over it super quick for you all today. I start out by going back over the raised areas with some more bronze flesh tone, and then mix in Uriel yellow to increase the saturation. Then it's time for some pure Uriel yellow, and I work my way through to a pure Dawn yellow highlight. I'm only applying the final highlights to the edges and points of interest like the knot and the lines around it. Next up is the black, and black can be a tricky colour to get right as well, and this recipe is pretty straightforward. I'm going all over with some dark Reaper, then highlighting less of an area with some Thunderhawk blue, and then doing a final highlight of Rust Grey. You'll notice I'm not mixing the colours like I did with the yellows, and that's because I find these colours are a bit more forgiving against the black. Moving on to some true metallics, and we are well and truly on the home straight, and I can see the finish line in the distance. This project wasn't too hard in terms of painting skill, but more of a slog to get through each large piece. One thing I can really credit this kit for is the neutrality of it. You could easily turn this into a Bretonnian siege tower by draping a few banners off the sides, a dwarf tower by maybe kit bashing a couple cannons on top of the crow's nest, or even an orcs and goblins tower by adding a few spikes or hanging or nailing some dead men on the sides. It is really designed to be any army or faction friendly. If you get a chance, I highly recommend picking one of these up. Even though it's taken me a while to complete, I had a ball painting it, and sometimes you need a break from the little faces and swords. To my surprise, constructing this thing was relatively easy. It kind of just went together with no issues at all. I've been watching some videos of people building older GW kits and require a fair bit of handiwork to make everything slot together. I was really happy with the simplicity of it, and even the little ropes that operated the door were easy to pull through their holes and very straightforward. You definitely couldn't get lost constructing this old thing, so this gets a massive thumbs up from me. Now this siege tower is pretty much complete, but I want to lodge some arrows in it just to jazz it up a bit. To do this, I'm pulling out the Empire Archer kit that has a few spare arrows left over. This sprue came with so many options, and I still have a bunch of swords, bows, and heads left over from it. It's probably one of the best make your own Mordheim warband boxes you could ever find. I'm going to make my arrows a bone-like colour with some red feathers, and then it's time to lodge these suckers in front of the tower. I'm using my drill with the smallest drill bit to punch a small hole in it, but I'm not going the full way through. Once I've made these holes, I trim the arrows off and then simply glue them in. If you're going to glue your arrows in with super glue, be really careful with your placement as you only have one shot at it. And that's pretty much it. Here is one Avaland themed siege tower. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. And I also want to say a massive thank you to everyone who went and bought some of my merch for my first merch release a few weeks ago. I can't believe it all sold out in a day, and I'm very thankful for you all for going, supporting me on that level. So thank you so much. Also, I will be doing another merch drop very soon, probably for October. Also, last up, I want to say a massive thank you to all my Patreon members. You guys are a bunch of legends. I couldn't do it without your support. If you want to join the Anvil of Doom Patreon, there is a link in the bio, and I look forward to seeing you in the Discord. Anyway, I'm out of here to go play some Space Marine 2. I'll see you all next time. Cheers.